Hi everyone. I just want to take a minute and talk about the source explorations because this is one of those additional key components of the course that helps you get a chance to express your historical critical thinking in a bit more of a formal setting than we typically have on the discussions. So what I just want to do here is kind of go over the general expectations. Obviously, what is there for the discussion board this week is the prompt you need to respond to specifically in terms of building a thesis-based argument from. But as far as how you're doing that, the evidence you're using, and so on, that's what I want to emphasize here because I find that's one area that can lead to a lot of confusion. First and foremost, 600 to 900 words is the standard. That doesn't include title page or heading or the works cited / bibliography at the end of the paper. So it's the content itself that should be in that range. And it's important to be in that range because that is the typical range that will build the basis for a successful argument. And also, you don't want to go beyond that because, well, think of it this way. If somebody has 1,300 words versus 900 words, it gives you a chance to build a more sophisticated argument. And having a consistent basis for grading is really important for me. Otherwise, it starts to create an unfair standard for some students over others. So as far as length, editing is important and staying within that range. As far as structure too, again, APA or MLA, you've got examples linked in the syllabus that you can use and in the discussion board as well. Make sure you're following that as closely as possible. The citation formatting, in a sense, is a language. So if you're following a language I know, it's easier for me to credit your research and understand the relationship between your research, your evidence, and your critical thinking accordingly. If you're using a language I don't know, or we don't know as a course, and you're posting these to the discussion boards, it gets really confusing really fast to understand the type of evidence you're using, how you're using it, and so forth. So please be very mindful of that. These are thesis-based papers, so make sure, very typically, your introduction ends with your thesis. Your thesis is not just a fact. Slavery happened between 1619 and 1865 type of thing. It's what matters about that. Say the existence of the institution of slavery fundamentally transformed the American social structure, which continues to perpetuate racial inequality today. That's a thesis, something that can be argued. And that is very important. Based on the prompt, you need something that the basic standard is that a reasonable person would argue. That it's not just trying to think of an argument that's without getting too intensely political. In this day and age, that seems harder than usual. But something that you can see different sources look at differently as a potential source for discussion. So it's not something that, again, seems a hard and fast, this person lived at this time, this person did that. Something about why they did what they did, how they did what they did. Things that aren't so clear-cut and that are important in some ways. Part of a thesis is your so what. In other words, so what you wrote your paper about George Washington chopping down a cherry tree. So what? Why in the world should any reader want to read this or care about it? Your thesis should indicate why it matters. So say with the Washington example, why does it matter that George Washington, there's this mythology about him cutting down the cherry tree and this moral lesson that comes from it? Why does that exist? Why is that important? That you can turn into a thesis. So sometimes thesis statements are more self-evident than others. Ideally, within the confines of whatever the prompt is, you want to pick something that interests you as well. Because if you're not interested in the argument, it can be really painful for the reader to read, obviously very painful for you to write, and because of that, very difficult to show off your critical thinking. So remember that and think about that carefully as you put together your papers for the week and you kind of get that idea in your head as to how you want to approach it. The more you're interested and invested in it, the better it's going to be as a result. As far as expectations otherwise, evidence is an important one. The assigned readings are your first stop for evidence to support that thesis, but you are also required to have at least one outside meaning not assigned in the course, peer-reviewed scholarly journal article, or book. Now, what does that mean? It does not mean a website. It does not mean you go to cliffnotes.com or history.com or something like that. Those are not scholarly peer-reviewed sources. They are written for general audiences, often without any evidence seemingly contained in them whatsoever, or any expectation that they coincide with historical accuracy. Because nobody's checked them to know for sure. It's just somebody wrote an article about ancient Greece that, for all you know, their expertise is in making woven baskets or something. They just happen to be assigned at their job of writing that. So you just don't know how accurate they are. Peer-reviewed sources, most books are like that. Journal articles you can get from the library mostly are like that. And most library search engines will allow you to pick specifically peer-reviewed sources. Those are important because, again, you're seeing what historians, what academics, what scholars have to say about it. And that's important because, again, they should be saying things based on evidence, not just their opinion or whatever might inspire some people to post some of the crazy things they do on the internet. It's okay to bring in additional sources beyond these by all means, but make sure you're grounded in that type of quality evidence as much as possible, because that's going to make it a lot easier to write your thesis and then support it in the paper itself. Another important thing that people get confused about at times in writing these papers, particularly because it's a formal assignment, avoid general personal pronouns. I, we, are, things like that. Because I puts the focus on you rather than your critical thinking. It becomes more of an opinion piece. We means you're assuming things. Like, we tend to think of Native Americans as savages. I see things like that in a lot of papers, which is problematic in a number of ways. But you are telling the reader what they think. Your job is not to tell the reader what they think. It is to persuade them your thesis ultimately is correct. So be very careful you're not making those we and our type of assumptions, because it, in a sense, insults the reader's intelligence. So you want to be really careful to avoid stuff like that. Then, all that being said, look at the rubric. Again, it's right in the syllabus. That tells you, when I grade it, these are the criteria I'm looking for. So as you edit, check those boxes. Make sure you're as high as you can be in each of those criteria. And again, that's going to lead you certainly to the highest grade possible. Then when you post them, copy and paste the content into the discussion board, and then attach it, please, as well as an attachment, just in case there's some sort of formatting catastrophe, which Canvas is very good at sometimes. I can look at the paper in its intended format in case that becomes an issue as far as evaluating the work. So those are the basics. As always, you have questions about things, just let me know. Again, remember, in general, because this is a more formal assignment than the general discussions, you want to take a more formal, professional tone here. This is a chance to really look over your writing as well, to see how you're able to build an argument based in that more formal setting, which is, of course, typical of most classes at the college level and humanities, social sciences, and such. So it may be a good test for some of you to see where you are as far as that goes as well. So, yeah, that's, I think, all I have there. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, good luck with the paper.